Before we begin, thank you very much to John. Just John for joining my Patreon campaign. Thank you so much for the support. Thank you for helping to keep the channel going. We are getting close to the end of the month. I still have shout-outs to do. Congratulations, you made it all the way through. Good on you. I don't get to use my normal intro for what? Almost 2 straight months now? I mean, it can't last forever. I'm sure at some point in April I'll actually get to just do a normal intro and not have a shout-out due, but, you know. Well, it's not yet. It's not yet. I felt nostalgic today. I kind of felt a little bit nostalgic for some of the Transformer games I remember getting super excited for when they first got announced, and now looking back at them, I was easy to please. Or maybe we were just starved. You know, when you're in the middle of a desert, you'll take any oasis no matter how nasty it is, as long as it's water, right? So right now, we are eagerly anticipating some more information about Transformers Reactivate, which seems like it's going to be the biggest budget Transformers game ever produced. At the very least, it seems to be the most, what's a good word for it? Ambitious, I guess. Not only doing their own story and doing their own design styles and all that, but also just, you know, going a very different direction than we've seen past games go. It's looking interesting and very different. So I want to go back to where Transformer games kind of get started. I mean get started for real, because there was Convoy no Nazo in Japan, and then the Famicom Disk System had Headmasters, so it had games. There are predecessors to it as well. I think it's a ZX Spectrum game if I remember the system right. And then, there's even a Game Boy Color game in Japan, and but really, the first games that really felt like modern Transformer games, that felt like I could play as a Transformer, came out on the PlayStation 2, and they were both named Transformers. Now, the weird thing is, both games we're going to talk about were named Transformers at first, were named Transformers afterwards. But previously, they were known by something else. So, for instance, the first one we're going to look at is the one that I did a full playthrough on, which was originally called Transformers Tatakai. So, literally, I believe that's literally just Transformers Fight. But for whatever reason, they decided, no. Just Transformers. All right, it's not even super robot life form Transformer. It's not even that. It's just Transformer. So this was the first attempt to do a modern PlayStation. And then remember, I'm saying modern. I mean like the first ones capable of 3D graphics. Not like, obviously none of this is modern now, but it was the first time they had attempted anything like this. So Transformers Tatakai was fun to watch as an observer in the West, because it seemed like they were doing the kind of Transformer game that, the 80s and 90s kids grew up wishing that they would make. You're playing as Optimus Prime. You're playing as the traditional Autobots. You're battling Decepticons. It looks so cool. Today, we can kind of look back on that. You can look at my playthrough as well and realize it wasn't exactly all rosy as we expected it to be. At its core, it's a pretty basic beat-em-up game. You got punches, you got kicks, you got shots, you have a super attack and all that. It's not the most exciting or thrilling of games to play through. It is a lot of button mashing. It is a lot of, this is supposed to be some kind of combo, but all I'm really doing is just hitting the square button over and over, and then something eventually drops dead. And then I move on to the next fight. It's not to say there is no place for games like that. It's just you're hoping for a little bit more, I think. Of course, this is PS2. We weren't getting too complicated yet. This did result in fights that look like this, as a lot of generic prowls just start ganging up on you all at once. It was awkward. You can watch the replay of the bit of my playthrough and see for yourself. But it's amusing. I'll say it's at least amusing. The vehicles in this game do the thing that I hate Transformer games to do. And I think this is even a problem today. I'm hoping Reactivate does something differently with this. A lot of the times, a Transformer video game is going to treat a vehicle mode really just as transportation. It's really just comes down to a run button that I have to physically change in order to activate, which is a little bit unfortunate. It's just a travel method when, there's whole games based around car combat that you could take inspiration from. But I have yet to see a Transformer game that does that properly. 9 times out of 10, almost 10 times out of 10, now that I think about it, you're just going from one place to another in vehicle mode. And you think, what else would you be doing? Well, like I said, there's games that do things with vehicles. There are games that revolve entirely around being a vehicle. Those kind of games, like that would be really cool to take some, a few cues from. What was weird about this game, if you haven't looked into it before, is that the entire game, while this is a Japan-only game, it never came out in the West. However, the game is entirely playable in English. And you'll excuse the potato quality photos. This is a game from over 20 years ago. They didn't exactly take high-resolution screenshots of things. But the game itself was designed entirely with English in mind. Not only was there an English text option, there's also English dub option. And when you switch to the English option, Convoy is referred to as Optimus Prime. The characters are referred to, for the most part, by their American or Western names. I think Jazz is still Maester. But aside from a few exceptions, like, you are watching the characters actually portray themselves as their Western incarnations, albeit with the Japanese storytelling motifs of, like, being much more militaristic than they were in the original American cartoon. It's fun to watch, but the dialogue is not the best. It's cheesy and corny. There's some English involved. They get a few things wrong. The famous line that they give at the end of this is, "Till all is one." It's as close as they could come. But at least they tried, right? Here's what was cool about this game. And here's what, I would love to see this done again. For starters, there is an actual Decepticon campaign. Now, Fall of Cybertron actually allows for that. You can actually play as both Autobot and Decepticon sides of the story in the High Moon games. But most of the time when you play a Transformers game, you're left stuck as the Autobots. Now, Reactivate seems to have fixed that because they've let the Autobots and Decepticons become one team against a common enemy. Here, they did it, pretty much traditional style. You pick either Autobot or Decepticon, and then you go through a full storyline as those characters. And playing through both gives you the full story of the video game, which is actually kind of cool. It's time travel, so get ready to be confused. There's time travel involved. There is a Shockwave who's gone nuts. At least in the future, he's gone nuts. It's a lot of shenanigans. It's a lot of weird storytelling stuff, but it's amusing if even through the weird dialogue. But seeing a Decepticon campaign is cool. What is cooler about this game, and what I absolutely love it for, is the roster. Holy crap, the roster. So, there's even sides. 19 Autobots, 19 Decepticons, playable. That's right. Over almost 40 playable characters in this game. Now, to play as all of them, you do have to play through the game twice, because on the first playthrough, you unlock characters as you progress through the story, and then on the secondary playthrough, different characters become unlocked. So if you want to play as, obscure characters, you're going to have to play this game 3 times. It's not a game worth playing 3 times. I'm going to tell you right now, as much as I hate to admit it, because I did have fun playing through this game, but almost in a Mystery Science Theater way of having fun. But the characters get really like shocking. It goes from the first 4 years of Transformers. So you got Optimus, Wheeljack, Jazz, etc. But eventually you will unlock Rodimus Prime, Cup, Ultra Magnus, keep going through the game, and you'll start unlocking the weird things like Headmaster characters, like Double Cross and Grotusk. Grotusk is playable in a Transformers video game. And then on the Decepticon side, you eventually get Full Tilt. I don't even think Full Tilt was a character in the cartoon, but he is playable in this game. And then you throw in all of the characters they used for generic enemies. Yes, it means you're going to beat up the same Motormaster 8 or 9 times in a single stage. However, throw those characters in, and you're looking at a roster of almost 100 different Transformer characters you're going to encounter or play as. That's enormous. That's enormous. You have to play the Gotcha Transformer game in order to get that many characters now. Super cool. Super cool. I loved it. They did something weird. Like there's also like multiple versions of Triple Changers depending on which vehicle mode you want them to pick. So it's their way of working around their own game engine while not overcomplicating the gameplay for the Triple Changers. Kind of clever. So it's a weird game for me to be nostalgic about because I didn't grow up with it. I played it as an adult, but it's amusing. It's a nice time capsule of where video games were at the time and what we thought we wanted in a Transformer game. And still, I would love to see a modern interpretation of that kind of game. It just needs to be done a lot cleaner, right? But then there's the one we got in America. The other Transformers PS2 game, which I think was almost released right around the same time. And this is Transformers for PS2 again. But this one was originally Transformers Armada, done by Atari of all companies. So, Transformers for the PS2. Now, this one I would love to actually play for you guys on stream. It's one of those that is notoriously hard to get running on anything unless you have like all original hardware and all the modern hookups to get original hardware to actually work on a modern system. I don't have all those hookups. I don't even know if I have working PlayStation 2 anymore. It's been so long since I turned mine on. However, what we do have here is a interesting little video game. So for starters, for the time, it looked real good. Like the visuals were actually really surprisingly nice for a PS2 game, especially a licensed PS2 game for a license that didn't typically get video games. So it was kind of not only like a new experience just to see, but also it felt like they were genuinely trying really hard to make it work. And when I say like the game looked good, I mean like Hotshot looked good. Hotshot actually managed to look good in this game. Something about the proportions work a little bit better for me. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the trimming of some of the kibble on the design. But yeah, you can see, like, you got these nice forested details. You've got these ancient ruins. You've got jungle and more ruins. We'll get to that in a minute. We'll get to that in a minute. Okay, so the main point of this game was the Minicon collection, because you got to do a lot of Minicon collecting, and the Minicons work the way they do in the show, which means it's very thematic to the series, and it feels like you're doing what the Autobots from the cartoon were doing. You're collecting Minicons, they are giving you power-ups. And this is a game that, again, uses vehicle modes basically as a run button just to traverse from one area to another very quickly. You can ram enemies, but it's not the most effective of attacks. You just as well to transform and attack them. The big movement here was there were Minicons that gave you movement, like the ability to glide. And that is the kind of thing that opened up a lot more like freedom throughout the game. The problems this game has are kind of multifaceted. So for starters, you have an extraordinarily limited roster. So remember, Transformers Tatakai, almost 100 characters, right? Throughout playable and non-playable Transformers, almost 100 different characters. In Transformers Armada for the PS2, you had exactly 7. I don't mean 7 playable, I mean 7 total. On the Autobot side, you had the basic crew from the first episode, Optimus, Hotshot, and Red Alert. On the Decepticon side, you had Megatron, Starscream, Cyclonus, Tidal Wave, and that is literally it. They scripted a fight with Demolishor, but they cut him from the game. Probably a developmental time constraint thing. But for whatever reason, we only had 4 Decepticons, which means some of them got reused in boss battles, which starts to make the game feel kind of repetitive. And combining the repetition of the characters you fought with the repetition of the stages, which they reused a lot of assets to bulk out the levels, and you get something that does feel quite repetitive to play. There's just not a whole lot of variety going on, despite the universe they have to tap. Even if you're limited to the stuff that came out in Transformers Armada, they had Tidal Wave, meaning they had access to all the characters that came before. Scavenger, Blur, Thrust, Sideways. They had options, but this is a game where they put a lot into the visuals, but not a whole lot into the variety. You can see where the budget went, let's put it like that. And then there's the difficulty. Oh my god, the difficulty of this game. I can remember to this day a review that described the difficulty of this game as sadistic. And it is. Like, it's beatable, but it is not a breeze, considering it is based on what was at the time seen as purely a kids franchise. The fact that the game came out and was this hard is kind of brutal. It's just that extra little notch of like, why did you bother making it that hard? This is for kids. I mean, even as an adult, last time I played it, it felt brutal. What gets you through the game is some of the highlights of this. So because this game is done, because of the way this game is done, now David Kay and Gary Chalk did reprise Optimus and Megatron, so you have them. But what's interesting about it is that the directing actually seems to care in this game, and it actually does feel like some effort was put into like the direction of the voice acting, which means you actually have the characters from Transformers Armada, and it actually feels like they're correct. It feels like they're actually trying. They have emotion to their performances. They are there's a scene where after he beats Starscream where Optimus Prime just feels like particularly annoyed and a little bit more brutal as a result. And it's a take you don't see in the show. It almost feels like what I really wish we had gotten out of Armada rather than what we actually did, when it seems like a competent director is in charge of these characters. So I think it's worth it just to watch the cutscenes and just get a different experience from the characters. Of course, the thing that everyone remembers from the game is the Tidal Wave fight, which, yes, it is absolutely epic. There's an entire stage that takes place on and inside Tidal Wave. Inside to the point where you can visit his head inside his vehicle mode. Which is a really weird, surreal experience, but it exists. It's an epic fight. It is an absolutely epic fight. One of the cooler fights on the PlayStation 2. Like this, like Shadow of the Colossus level, but with all projectile stuff. It's intense. It's really cool. And let's not forget that this is also the game that lets you fight Unicron one-on-one. Just that. It's just at least just a little bit bigger than Tidal Wave, I think. The weird thing is, like, he is almost just a little bit bigger because you only see him in planet mode. He never transforms. I will admit, for how big Unicron's supposed to be, he's designed a little bit simplistic in this game, so it feels like you're fighting the toy. But the point is, yeah, it's the one game I know of where you can literally just, like, have a one-on-one with Unicron, which is kind of a cool way to finish a Transformer game, I feel. Okay, so I guess I've miscounted then, right? So I guess that means there's 8 Transformers in the game, technically. If we count that one too. There's minicons. The notable minicons are there. Most of the minicons are generic, and most of the enemies you come across in the game are generic as well. For some reason, Armada, in video game form, had a whole bunch of grunt soldiers and drones to go do their fighting, rather than sending Demolisher and Cyclonus, the bulk and skull of Transformers, to do it. So that was me just kind of going down memory lane on 2 video games. One that I was like, I mean, I played as a kid and was surprised at how good it was, despite how repetitive it got, versus the game that I always wished that came out and I got to play, and then when it did, I realized the grass is not always greener. It's just interesting to me that 2 games, both originally with unique names, then becoming the same name, ended up going in such radically different directions with what was going on. And today, yeah, like it's for better or worse, still games that are talked about. And I don't know if that means we just haven't gotten enough good Transformer games, or if they really are just that memorable. Either way, I wanted a nostalgia trip today. So thank you for coming down on that trip with me today. As always, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Guys, I am facing the most powerful enemy any YouTuber can face, the algorithm, and I need your help to defeat him. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment. Every time you do, we attack that algorithm and we drive it back until it can no longer defeat this channel. Thank you very much.